Wrestling companies, no matter their size or popularity, have a habit of showcasing the worst of humanity. Over the years, top companies around the world have acted in such an unreasonable manner in the hope of creating entertaining segments and ultimately striking a profit. Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at 10 times wrestling companies reached a new low. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Also check out our new channel, Wrestlelamia Shorts. Number 10. WWE incorporates God into a storyline. Incorporating religion into a storyline is a risky move, as a wrestling company can often deeply offend a specific religious group. This was most definitely the case in 2006 when WWE booked the legendary Shawn Michaels to team with God at Backlash in 2006. The build to the match featured Vince McMahon mocking God as much as humanly possible, and segments which were designed to be comedic were just insulting and kinda tasteless. WWE executive Bruce Pritchard attempted to defend the storyline in 2021 during a discussion on his podcast by stating, "This is entertainment and this is parody, and it's okay for movies and all that to do it, but not to do it here. Religious people that have lived their entire life under that and have grown up in that way might have been offended, but I do think that based in entertainment and parody, this was entertainment. For those that took it seriously, well then, sorry." Number 9. WCW mock Jim Ross to a disturbing degree. It's extremely hard to find anyone within the wrestling industry that has a negative opinion of Jim Ross. Even Vince McMahon, who berated JR on air for years, clearly had a ton of respect for him and realized that he was an expert at his craft. Unfortunately, in 1999, WCW decided to debut a character that would mock JR, and it made for uncomfortable viewing. The character in question would be known as Oklahoma, and he would be portrayed by former WWE writer Ed Ferrara. He would dress up as JR and proceed to mock JR's Bell's palsy. It was atrocious that this idea was ever approved, and the outcry from wrestling fans and wrestling personalities was completely justified. Number 8. ECW's High Incident. ECW were known to push the boundaries in relation to what was permitted on wrestling shows, but on one occasion in 1996, even they went too far. During the High Incident event, Sandman was crucified by Raven and his villainous stable known as the Nest. Raven and his stablemates would tie Sandman to a cross using barbed wire, and naturally, due to the religious imagery involved, the segment offended thousands of people across the world. ECW issued a subsequent apology, but the fallout was very severe, as Kurt Angle was close to signing with ECW, but this angle completely derailed any interest he had in signing with the company. In a 2014 interview with Title Match Wrestling, Raven would discuss the infamous segment, and surprisingly, Raven would show no regrets for taking part in the segment.
And I thought, man, why don't I crucify the Sandman? That'd be great. You know, I've always said Raven's a martyr for society's dysfunction. I was like, so now I'll make Sandman feel how I feel as I'll make him a martyr for society's dysfunction now, and let him feel my pain. And of course, a few people, basically Taz, Kurt Angle, and somebody else, took offense. They thought I was denigrating Christianity or some kind of nonsense. It's just asinine. I mean, one has nothing to do with the other. I mean, religious iconography has been used symbolically throughout history. You know what I mean? And I made a very intelligent use of it, and a very creative use of it. And they didn't see it that way. They only saw it as me knocking religion.
Number 7. The exploitation of Reid Flair. Reid Flair tragically passed away in 2013, and in 2015, for whatever reason, WWE decided to use his name to further a storyline between Reid's brother Charlotte Flair and WWE star Paige. On the November 16, 2015 edition of Raw, a contract signing took place between Charlotte and Paige, and during the segment, Charlotte would state that she was going to pay tribute to Reid in a match. This was when, completely out of the blue, Paige declared, "Your little baby brother, he didn't have much fight in him, did he?" Fans were utterly stunned that Paige would say this line, and the backlash online came immediately. It was rumored online that WWE hadn't asked the Flair family for permission to use Reid's name in this manner, but they denied these claims. Quite rightly, the tasteless angle was voted by Wrestling Observer newsletter readers as the most disgusting promotional tactic of 2015. Number 6. Paul Heyman goes too far. Paul Heyman has made some controversial decisions over his career, and one of these was the way he handled ECW's signing of Tammy Sytch aka Sunny back in 1998. Heyman produced an interview segment where Sitch would be asked about her traumatic life and real-life drug problems. She would break down during this interview, and it wasn't remotely entertaining viewing, and it did little to further any storyline narrative that ECW were telling. Off camera, Heyman's voice could be heard saying, "Tell us about that. Describe that feeling." It was exploitative and disgusting, and Heyman was called out by names such as Jim Cornette, who described the whole ordeal as heartbreaking. Number 5. WWE's Mickie James storyline. When WWE transitioned into a PG product in the summer of 2008, it was expected that most of their content would be toned down. However, in 2009, WWE decided to introduce a bizarre storyline which was designed to humiliate one of their top stars, that being Mickie James. The storyline involved Layla and Michelle McCool belittling and mocking James's weight. The storyline was controversial, as WWE had a Be a Star anti-bullying campaign running at the time, so they were called out for their blatant hypocrisy. Despite criticisms being directed at WWE, this storyline went on for months, and it evolved into Layla and McCool dressing up in pig costumes and trying to embarrass James as much as possible. Discussing the storyline on the Ring the Bella podcast, James revealed that it was a hard storyline to do.
It was hard in the moments, and I think it was hard for everyone. Like, in order to do it, there would be times where it's like, oh, I think this might be a little too far, or like, oh. But I will say the end goal was to get Michelle and Layla over as monster heels and as the big heels out of the group. And I think it was very successful in that retrospect. And I think that for a generation of people, especially now with like speaking out and anti-bullying and all of these things, it's given people the power of their voice, because words are so powerful.
Number 4. WCW exploits Scott Hall's alcoholism. During the existence of WCW, they delivered some senseless storylines, yet the way they exploited Scott Hall's real-life problems into a storyline should have never taken place. After Hall turned on Kevin Nash, they implemented a storyline which saw Hall's real-life alcohol addiction filter into his WCW persona. He would often arrive at WCW Nitro intoxicated and looking completely out of it. In September of '98, WCW would book a match between Hall and Lex Luger, and Hall was so intoxicated that he couldn't even finish the match. They would even have Hall throw up on Eric Bischoff and on one of the TV cameras at ringside in an attempt to sell Hall's problems. WCW, using his real-life problems, got a negative reception from virtually every wrestling fan, and was quite rightly voted the Wrestling Observer's most disgusting promotional tactic back in '98. Eric Bischoff would reflect on the storyline during an appearance on his podcast, and thankfully Bischoff did admit that he regrets booking the storyline. It was based on reality. So many people knew because of problems and challenges that Scott had at the time. It was pretty well known with a lot of the wrestling audience that Scott had an issue. It was a decision I made, and I made it regretfully. I want to make it clear because I haven't seen it this week. People have been sending it to me because it was the anniversary of the segment, and it kinda disgusted me. Not so much the scene, because like so many things we have seen in wrestling, it's over the top, it's ridiculous, and sometimes you just shake your head and say, wow, why did anyone think that that was a good idea? I think exploiting somebody's chemical problems and addictions the way that I chose to is one of the things among several that I really regret. I think it was in really poor taste. It wasn't entertaining, and it wasn't a weak attempt on my part singularly to try and make sense out of reality in a fictional world, and I regret it. Number 3. Vince McMahon interviews Brian Pillman's widow a day after his death. On the day of Brian Pillman's passing, Vince McMahon made one of the most tasteless decisions of his career. He decided to interview Pillman's widow on Raw, and McMahon seemed more concerned about deflecting any blame from WWE's side than showing any support to Pillman's family. It was completely inappropriate even for the Attitude Era, and it's the type of segment that would have never taken place today. Mick Foley, who was an integral part of WWE's roster during the time, would criticize McMahon's interview on his podcast, and he stated that no grieving widow should be interviewed in that manner. I think it was done with good intentions. I just don't think any grieving widow should be interviewed for anything, and I know all the time, the news folks around and tries to get the words from someone who has lost somebody, but I do believe that the person should be left alone to mourn in a way that doesn't involve doing an interview on live national television. Number 2. WWE exploit Eddie Guerrero's passing. When Guerrero sadly passed away in 2005, it seemed like WWE would honor the memory of Guerrero with grace and respect. However, it wasn't before long that they were using Guerrero's passing to fuel storylines. The period following Guerrero's passing was one of the worst times on WWE TV, as WWE just couldn't wait to use Guerrero's name to get the crowd riled up. They would air segments such as Randy Orton placing The Undertaker into the back of Guerrero's lowrider, then crashing it into the stage, and in a segment between Orton and Rey Mysterio, Orton would claim that Guerrero was in hell. Most of the blame at the time fell on Orton, when in fact Orton himself was rather uncomfortable with the segments. WWE could have easily honoured the memory of Guerrero with the Mysterio World title win, but they simply couldn't resist exploiting his legacy in the hope of some cheap heel heat. And number 1, Kevin Dunn's sinister reaction to Owen Hart's passing. Since Owen Hart's passing in 1999, WWE have been heavily bashed for carrying on their over-the-edge pay-per-view. Whilst fans as well as Hart's family are well in their right to criticise WWE for this, new information came to light during Owen Hart's edition of the Dark Side of the Ring, which made WWE, well specifically Kevin Dunn, look utterly heartless. Jim Ross was interviewed on the episode, and JR stated that he and Jerry Lawler had no idea if their friend and colleague was even alive, and he was searching for an update on his headset. But this is when WWE producer Kevin Dunn came on the headset and declared, "He's dead, and you're back in 10, 9. Dunn had given no time to let JR mourn or even reflect. All he cared about was carrying on the pay-per-view. It was a truly disgusting revelation from JR that ultimately portrayed Dunn as completely inhuman. Well, there you have it, folks. 10 times wrestling companies reached a new low. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.